Right, let's 1 minute pass. So let's just start. The music, hopefully, is just stopped as well. So, first off, thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about how you can tackle this very important subject, workforce planning. Myself, Rob Douglas, will be taking you through a few intro slides. I'll introduce a little bit more about us and where we come from. But then I will be passing over to Steve, who will be doing the bulk of this webinar, and he'll be sort of demonstrating some of our best practices on some of the thoughts and things we've done around workforce planning. I would remind you as we go along as well, we do have a Q&A option here. We are live, so please feel free to put your comments, questions in as we go along, and I'll interrupt Steve as he's doing demo if there's any particular points you want to dig into in more detail. So let's get on with things a little bit. So first off, we're here to talk about workforce planning, and what gives us the right to tell you or talk about workforce planning? Well, it's quite a lot of experience. Myself and Steve work at iSeeIt. We are a specialist consultancy focusing on financial planning and analytics, of which workforce planning is a key element of that. We've got 25 years worth of experience. We've delivered 600, 700 plus projects around this. Workday trust us as a partner in this particular area. And for the last 3 years running, we've been the EMEA Partner of the Year in this particular area. So we're bringing all that experience from our consultancy team, from working with hundreds of customers ourselves, all those implementations and that practice around what we've seen around workforce planning. Alongside that, we've also bringing Workday's experience with their some 7,000 customers. So Workday Adaptive Planning has been in the marketplace for over 15 years. It supports 7,000 customers worldwide across every different industry vertical. You can see here some examples, and also every different size of organization. But one thing we've seen in common, and all these 7,000 customers see in common, is that workforce planning is critical for them. 95% of these customers, I'd almost say 100%, but I know there's got to be one or two who don't do workforce planning, but all of these customers, I'm pretty sure, do workforce planning in some form or another. And we'll dig into what that means and what that might mean for you and how you might be able to tackle and improve that. But we're bringing all that experience and some of that knowledge and best practices into this webinar, which we're looking to share with you today. So workforce planning, as you know, because you've turned up at this webinar and you've said, yes, I'm interested to learn more, is critical for your organization. It is one of the biggest costs and most variable costs on your P&L, and it varies. You can see here some stats which Steve pulled together on companies. 40 to 80% of your costs, depending on what sort of organization you're in, it is significant. And of course, this can vary month to month, year to year significantly. It's not like your building or manufacturing costs or R&D costs. This is a critical part of your organization, but can vary a lot. But many different departments really get involved in the workforce planning as well. It's not just finance, this is important too, but HR as well. And I know we've got finance and HR people here as well. You both look at employees differently, but have to reconcile that between the two systems, what you're paying people, what people are doing in the organizations, linking that across the organization is critical. And finance often get holding the bag in terms of the financial numbers and the budget against that. So workforce planning isn't just about doing the cost. It's about underpinning the strategy of the organization. It's a critical part of the organization. And that's because people are complex. They're interwoven into all sorts of parts of your business. And so you'll have upstream drivers to headcount, which might be things like we're growing revenue, we need more people, or there might be sort of demographics, we need more people in a certain department, a certain area of our business, or there might be some strategic drivers which are changing the kinds of people you need, AI adoption, which is changing the kinds of people you need, or the different staff in different departments. You might be restructuring as such. And that leads to in the other side of employees, downstream impacts, all sorts of things. Of course, you're modeling in the finance side out those costs and making sure we're accounting and got the right budget elements. But there's other elements in there as well, which you might be modeling, sort of the impact on the other resources in the organization. You might be looking at skills and territory sort of pieces as well, and other elements around people. So people are at the heart of a business. They're a significant cost in a business. They vary a lot, and they're interwoven into all parts of a business and have upstream and downstream effects. So effectively modeling workforce planning or doing workforce planning for your organization well can really make a big difference for you. But workforce planning is really a lot of different things to different people. When we talk about financial planning, we really know what we're talking about: the annual budget, quarterly reforecast, long-term strategic plan. But when we go to talk to organizations about workforce planning, it means lots of different things to different people. Of course, most organizations at the base level are doing things like headcount and cost planning, headcount and reconciliation. Even this for organizations is very hard. Say, looking at, I've got this current headcount, but I've got to get to this target headcount. Which departments are over and under? Well, what about open headcount we've got going as well? Reconciling that headcount plan is difficult, and keeping on top of that month to month, quarter to quarter, who's hiring more, are people trending in the right direction? That basic level of headcount planning and driving that through the costs is complex for organizations to keep track of. If you've got multiple HR systems, multiple divisions around the world, it becomes even more complex. But then as we talk to other organizations, we see lots of other different types of workforce planning come into. Perhaps capacity planning, where you're saying, well, we've got this demand coming from our revenue side, and I can see that drives down, as it said, into that downstream effect, saying, I'll need this many people in this many departments. How can I look at my demand versus capacity and look at gaps, perhaps gaps which were coming up in it? And how can I fix and fill those gaps, perhaps using those strategies around build, buy, or borrow, or perhaps even botting now with the AI sort of pieces. So those things, factors looking at demand versus capacity. And then organizations, of course, at a higher level are looking at things like strategic planning, looking out that 3 or 5 year sort of view. Where are we going to need staff? How are we going to restructure? What about acquisitions and disposals and such? How does that affect our workforce, and looking through that? And then other organizations perhaps might be looking at more detail at talent-based planning, looking at the skills they need, and looking around that piece as well. So workforce planning really does mean a lot of different things to different people, and we'll be showing you some of these things today. Love to hear from you in the chat and the questions. If you've got particular areas of what you think workforce planning means to you, we'd love to hear those, because we see lots of different use cases for it. So that's a quick introduction about workforce planning, why we see it as so critical, why we see it so critical across those 7,000 customers, Workday Adaptive Planning Supports, and what it might mean to you. I'm going to pass over to Steve now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what we're going to cover in the demo and then get to the demo. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so just really briefly talk through what we're about to go through. So I have a 3 or 4 use case examples, all built within Workday Adaptive Planning. So what you'll see is that the same version of the software that all of the 7,000 customers use. So this is a full version of the software. Hence, as Rob said, if you do have any questions, please do shout out and we can try and cover them and maybe show you some stuff. But what I thought I'd focus on, because we don't have time to cover everything, I'm going to start with some headcount reconciliation. Again, as Rob said, that's a key area that affects everybody pretty much every day. Just getting that basic reconciliation right, and how Workday can help you with that. We'll look at some headcount planning. So again, just operationally, starters, levers, pay rise. Again, that type of modeling and planning of how moving people around the business, and how that looks within Workday. Then we'll look at maybe some of the upstream impacts. So look at some capacity planning. And again, I'll share an example of a model we actually built for another customer a year or so ago, just to show how other people are doing that from an upstream modeling perspective and managing the demand. And I'm going to round off with some strategic planning. So how maybe this can support you looking at a 5-year view. Again, skills changes, growth, attrition, and what does that mean, and how do you model strategies to mitigate against those points? But just a quick overview before we do that on the next slide, which is the final slide before we get into the product, just to talk a little bit about what Workday Adaptive Planning is and does. And so this just lays out really what it looks like. There it is in the middle. the key points to draw from this slide really is you can connect to any software, so any underlying data source. So from an HR point of view, it doesn't have to be Workday HR. Obviously, as you'd imagine, it connects to Workday HR really well. But we've worked with all the other logos you can see on there. You can connect to any type of HR system and bring in employee level data or FTE level data or other types of information, as you'll see. Also financial ledgers, of course, as you'd imagine, and any other type of system. So I have a customer that brings in data from their CRM, and then that says every time we win a new job, we need 3 extra people, so it'll help me plan ahead, as an example. And you can see on that slide there the kind of other features and functions that you can do within Workday, because we're only just going to give you a taster today. Okay, but let's jump into the product and actually look at some things on the screen now rather than describing it. So I will just share my screen instead, and we'll kick off. Here we go. Okay, Rob, can you see that?
Just coming through now. Yes, I
All good?
can see headcount
Excellent. Okay,
reconciliation.
thank you. Yeah, so as I say, I'm going to start here just with the basics of headcount reconciliation. And this is, again, a key area. I have some background in this. I've spent a number of years in FP&A. So I used to do the staff cost for B&Q many years ago. So sort of 33,000 staff across a number of stores. And again, there's just that challenge of just gathering that level of data. And, often you just think it's just ones and zeros, right? How hard can it be? It's people or it's not people. But actually, it is a real challenge with disparate data and a constantly moving base of people leaving, starting, changing. So what this provides you is a centralized cloud-based platform where you can integrate seamlessly data from your HR system, from your finance system, or from anywhere else, and just have that immediately available and accessible to all in an easy to use environment, right? So this is before we start planning, just having the data in one place. All I would need to do here is load my latest data in, and here I'm comparing my working plan to my previous version. I've segregated filled roles and vacancies and a total headcount. So this tells me just by loading data straight away, where are there variances to my plan? This is my headcount here. I can see the ups, the downs, the movements. I've got a waterfall here that's all linked to the data. Who's started, who's left, what changes have driven the number now versus what it is before. And I'm doing that here at a high level, but I can drill down and look at any level of the business. That's all within the same place. And this is just a made up, dummy company here, just to give you an idea. And we'll get into that as we move on. But immediately you can see that instant access to data. And this is fully interactive and easy to use. So users find this very simple to just click on the cells and drill down. I can go into HR and break that down for more information. And I can do that with any area of the business here, provided I have the access, of course. And let's make that point early on, because we are dealing with workforce and salaries and costs. Security throughout the model will deal with what you can and can't see. And I'm a super user here, so I can look at the whole business. If I was just looking after the HR team, that might be the only thing on my list. And I couldn't see everybody else, and everything else in between. But here it's really easy to drill down. So, if I wanted to say, hey, let's have a look at that corporate plan, and I'm really interested in how that variance there splits across job family. So I just a couple of clicks and I can break that 10 down across the different types of job role that I've got in this demo. And this job family is just another dimension, another way of analyzing the data. Again, typically people are getting this job done in spreadsheets now, but they're wrangling with different data types. Like it could be position, it could be family, it could be location, it could be grade. Okay, all of that data, again, can be loaded in automatically from your base systems. So you can report and analyze and drill, as you can see here. So I can get right down into detail. Maybe we can look at this global support center, and perhaps what I want to do here is look at this by individual worker. Again, I can click on that number. This tells me everybody in that department. And so I can see straight away we've got some gaps here, and I can look at this, and so I know immediately when I go down the list, I can see who's there and who's not. And then I could drill down further if I needed to. So I can click on explore cell there, and it will tell me even more data. These are options that you can switch on and switch off depending on what you want to give people access to. So if I really wanted to, you could allow people to drill right down to the current worker sheets like this. And then I can drill along and find out what's happened to those people, and I can see that somebody's left, and then that's why they're a 0. So all of the data from the bottom up is stored, connected, and usable in this simple to use environment. We're focusing a lot on headcount there, and this is just one example of the layout and the type of thing you can do. Similar example for cost. So again, I've got a similar waterfall here and just a breakdown of different costs and just providing different information from a cost point of view. So often that goes with headcount, right? So you move people around and the cost changes, but also there are other things that might happen from a cost point of view. So you might promote somebody, maybe somebody started a bit late, maybe there are other restructures, someone's changed pension plan or received a bonus that wasn't in the budget. So there are elements of cost that don't necessarily immediately affect the heads, but do affect the the staff costing side, and that can all be brought in and connected as well. So that's really just how Workday can assist from a reconciliation point of view. And I'm going to move on and look at planning. So again, I'm going to start at an operational level, at sort of bottom up level. So if I just click on this one here, this is again just a typical headcount planning template. All of this can be configured. So the design, the layout here is just something we've put together for the purposes of the demo. Fairly representative of what a lot of customers do. So here I've got that walk forward again, arrivals, departures, transfers, giving me an ending headcount at my corporate plan level. But this is live and fully connected to the data underneath. And so here I've loaded the employees and various information on those employees from my HR system. And to just make a key point here, this isn't trying to replace your system of record, okay? So your HR system is still sacrosanct. That's still the core area where your data is stored. But what Workday can do is bring that data in here. You don't have to enter it twice. It's pulled in automatically. But then you can use Workday to plan and model changes before you then either work them through the HR system or potentially integrate those changes back into your HR system. You can approve them in Workday. You could approve them in your HR system. It really depends on your change process and where you put those guardrails and boundaries within your business. And Workday can work with any segregation of duties or change control setup in this area. So just to show you how this works here, I'm going to just drill down and look at a particular example. So we'll go down to the HR team. And again, these are single templates that work for everybody. So if I was just looking at HR, I would have started here. Everything updates live. Here's my 38 employees. I've had a couple of people start, a couple of people leave, and I can see that straight away here. So here's Yolanda, and Yolanda has left or is planning to leave in November by choice. That's there. Okay, so I can see straight away what's happened to tie back to my waterfall. And you can bring in all kinds of information here. So down here, I've got some different types of charts. It's not just about the financials and the headcount. Here, what I've brought in from my HR database is compliance certification dates. So this is telling me over the coming year, how many people are due to have a certification expiry. And that's really useful because I could give that to my learning and development team and say, guys, you need to plan a big slug of training at the back end of the year because we've got some people here who are going to be out of compliance if they don't maintain. So we can use this to chase those people, to build a plan, to get ahead of the game. Similarly, I have place of work data here. So in this model, every employee is listed as either at home or in the office or on a hybrid working. That could be useful for desk planning, but also from an ESG point of view. We do a lot of sustainability work with customers now, and understanding length of commute. Are you at home? Are you in the office? Can have a bearing on scope 1, 2, 3 emissions and building towards a net zero target. So there's lots of ideas here of things that you can do and just examples of what other customers are doing. But also this is a planning tool at heart, right? So let's do some planning. So what I thought we'd do here is we're looking at a working plan. You can store as many plan versions as you need within Workday, and this will just keep going until you tell it to stop. So there's no limit on the number of plans, previous plans, actuals versions, or anything else that you need. And also you can take a scenario whenever you need to, provided you have the access. And again, just making that point. All of the things I'm showing you are things you can switch on and switch off. So I'm going to take a new scenario now. And let's just say we'll call it new headcount or something like that. I'll just come up with a name and click create. And yes, I want to move to that scenario. So as an end user, potentially as the owner of the HR department, I could be allowed to take a scenario, and it allows me to make some changes and then compare with what's going on. Over here, I have an analysis report, and immediately just having created that new headcount plan, that's now there. So this is saying, this is my headcount plan, both my people and my costs, compared to my working plan, which we've just taken a scenario from. So that's immediately there. So I can come back here and make some changes. And so maybe we're saying, okay, well, we know that this Dawn here is also about to leave the business. So I'm just going to roll this back because I'm using 2023 as my example. So we know that at the end of November, Dawn's going to leave. Now I've put that end date in and it's flagged up with a red, and it's given me a warning that says I have to put in a departure reason. What Workday will do is allow you to build rules to validate these types of inputs. So things like you can't put the end date in before the start date. That will fail, as an example. We do a lot of work around things like salary ranges. So if you're requesting a new starter, maybe if you enter a proposed salary in the plan, it has to be within a certain threshold range for that type of role, as another typical kind of validation. The value in this is you're allowing people to model and plan in an easy environment with guardrails. So you're not having to spend anywhere near as much time, whether you're in HR or finance, reconciling and checking the submissions. This isn't a spreadsheet where they can just put anything into the fields. Everything, as you can see, is button clicks, drop down lists, and choices. So it's an easy environment to work in, selecting from valid options that you have provided. So let's put in, maybe that's a restructure role. And I'm just going to hit save there. And again, that's all I need to do, right? I hit save, I'm done. This isn't a situation where you have to send spreadsheets around the business and somebody has to collate them all together. This is all we need to do. I'm finished. Immediately over here, I can see the impact straight away. Here's my head that's come out. Here's my savings. Now I've got savings for salary, I've got savings for commission and benefits ongoing, but also I've got a hit here for severance pay. And that's because I selected that it was a restructure. And so it's automatically dropped that in as an idea. And it will calculate that based on salary times number of years, tenure. That all happens in the background. That's all done automatically. And so that's a massive benefit from the costing side that all customers see when they do this. You can model and connect, again, back to Rob's slide, all of the downstream impacts of making a change. So all I've done here is selected that person's going to leave. Here is all the phased costing that's all done for you. So it's put the phasing in, it's stopped that in November, it's put in a severance, and it stopped calculating ongoing. And so there's a number of ways in which you can automate that. And just to give you another quick example, let's say someone left by choice, hit save, that will automatically recalculate. I'm going to move on from the detail in a second. I'm just keen to make this point. So if I go back in and look at what that's now done, so the severance is gone, but down here, it's driven some assumptions that says, probably going to have to hire somebody else in that role. So the following month, I've got a talent acquisition fee, so a recruitment fee, and there's a few months assumption here for some agency staff as well, because maybe somebody won't arrive on time, or perhaps we need to upskill them and we're going to have to backfill them with an agency role because that's a critical role. These are just ideas, but it shows you the type of thing you can achieve. And this is, again, really valuable. Just talking from my own experience, again, just thinking about my own experience of being store managers, for example, not really interested in the phasing of costs. They're not really interested in accruals, prepayments, or anything like that. They just want to hire people, move on, make the decisions, move on. And this allows them to very quickly make the changes that are needed. And then the financial side of it, or the phasing side of it, or any of the other links, everybody needs a laptop, everybody needs a uniform, that can all just happen automatically.
And Steve, yeah, you really highlighting a
Yeah.
great point here that employees are at the heart of a lot of different things, as you say, upstream, downstream. And so if we can capture some changes in the employee, then we can ripple that effect through all the other bits of the model, and the integrated model, and really see the effect on other parts of the business. So
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
We just as you were going through that, there was a question came in which I thought was
Okay.
a good question, which we should just touch upon a little bit. And somebody was asking about, well, how do we get some of this external data in and then start reconciling it as well? Because and I think the question was a little bit about we might be sourcing data from payroll and from
Hmm.
HR systems, and of course, it's a worry for a lot of people that we've got people on our payroll, we're paying people and they're not in our HR system, or where's the reconciliation between this? And you're capturing that a little bit in your reports where you're comparing existing headcount against expecting headcount. But we could, of course, expand that, couldn't we, and do things like, compare payroll, who's on the payroll and who's in our HR system and other things like that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So what you're doing here is by bringing data in from different sources, you're able to bring that together into the same systems. Typically, what we would do there is, uh, as an example, the employee name or the ID might be a dimension, and you bring them together and map them from the two systems. And this report could play back any gaps to say, I found someone who's in one and not in the other, for example. The other thing we classically find with payroll, and this is more about costing, is those timing differences, right? You sometimes find there's postings in the ledger that have nothing to do with the overall annual salary and bonus in HR. Maybe it's a catch up or a true up or something like that. And so we can tease out those. That happens. Yeah, that's a very common scenario that we see in that area. So yeah, there's tools and methods in place to help you do that. But ultimately, that principle is the same. When that integration runs, it will automatically make those checks for you and play back the result here. You don't have to do all of that manual checking and working yourself. We build that
Yeah, and it
once,
was
and then that just runs. You know?
Yeah, and then it'll start to look at the variances for you. And I think this is pretty common for a lot of organizations. They might, a lot of companies might be lucky and have one global HR system, such as Workday. A lot of companies don't, but they will definitely have multiple payroll systems because for
Yeah,
local
yeah,
sort of bits, pieces. So reconciling that data again, like this headcount reconciliation is a critical part. And again, pulling that all together and checking it is an important task.
yeah,
So,
absolutely right.
right.
So a couple of other ideas, again, just sharing examples of what other people have. We talked a little bit about the people planning, and then we talked about the costing side. And this really just looks after movements, transfers. I don't have time to get into this, but again, transfers is a key area. You can build in flags and authorizations around transferring from one cost center to another and make sure people have approved those before they come back. You can use that scenario modeling that we looked at to share scenarios with people to say, okay, I'm going to transfer these two people to you. Are you happy with that? And the other owner of the destination area can then say yes, check a box and have that done. So it solves a number of those kind of granular technical problems when you get into moving people around and starting and leaving and pay rise and that kind of thing. But I'm going to move on and just pick another couple of areas. So this one here is an interesting example. This is something, again, we worked with another customer on recruitment. And in here, what they were doing was loading in recruitment information, and they were using a recruitment system, like a talent management system, bringing data in here. If you can bring in things like the average time to hire for a particular role, the acceptance rate for a particular type of role, along with the open positions, you can start modeling for the hiring pattern. And what that's enabling this customer to do is to say, if I've got some upstream volume in here that tells me I need 4 or 5 extra people in the next 6 months, this will then work back from that and tell me when I need to start the hiring process based on the skill set and the availability of people that we see. That requires that base data, of course, but again, it's something we come across with a lot of customers. They have recruitment either on a spreadsheet or in a system that can be loaded in. You can load from Excel. So we integrate with Excel all the time. You can load Excel sheets into here, and again, just use that to connect this to your modeling plan and build a more cohesive driver-based forecast for all of those upstream, downstream impacts. Okay, so on the subject of upstream impacts, I'm going to move on and we'll talk a little bit about capacity planning that we said we touch on. I've got a couple of examples of this. One is short term and one is more of a strategic view. So just sharing this is a model. Again, we did this for another customer about a year or so ago. They were a contact center, so a typical call center. People ring in, somebody answers the phone. And what they're doing here is tactically planning by month the availability and the demand for people. So this is people actually sat at the desks answering the phone. So this is looking at the top of the funnel and coming back down onto headcount requirements. So a slightly different view. But this London contact center is saying, okay, I have a model input for a number of contacts, a number of customers. And that feeds down into a percentage of the number of people that are then likely to spend time actually talking on the phone. That gives me a number of inbound calls. And then if I model in the time it takes, this is a number of seconds for call handling time. So if I model the call handling time, changes in shift, people going on leave, to just making assumptions for everything to do with sickness, toilet breaks, productivity of staff, whatever it may be, you funnel down into a number of FTE that are required based on the demand that you've put in. And then what this allows people to do is, not just manage the people, but then start modeling trending, demand, phasing at the top of the funnel to drive headcount requirements. And what they were doing was testing, as an example, different ways of phasing that demand. So if I've got more of a customer support focus on this desk rather than maybe corporate phone calls, then that phasing would work differently and it will drive a different plan, a different required number of people in different areas. So it's allowing customers to tactically plan and model, where do I need that resource? That then could lead into borrowing people from other teams. If I've got a surplus in one team and a gap in another, I can move everybody across and have them answering different phones for different needs. Maybe I need to hire, maybe I need agency staff. But the value here is those instant results and an instant output of your plan going forward, just based on being able to put numbers in the top of the funnel. And this one's a call center, but that could apply to any type of changing business or business growth. Again, we could be acquiring another business, we could be growing or shrinking or moving, depending on the KPIs that model your business in particular. Okay, so just to round off for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to come even further up now into the sky and look at some 5-year strategic planning. Again, we have a number of customers that are looking at that longer term view of what are my requirements for skills, for headcount, for demand for people over a much longer time horizon. So I have an example of that here to show you. And this brings in, again, that benefit of being able to model different scenarios and drivers within Workday to deliver a result, to be able to make decisions, and to be able to agree plans. You'll have seen here, before I talk about what's on the screen, everything as you've seen is button clicks and drop-down lists and interactive, but also very simple in terms of the dashboards, the outputs, and what you can do. So what we find with a lot of customers is, rather than having to wait for decks and packs to be produced and sent round, a lot of customers will introduce their senior stakeholder team to Workday, maybe give them access to just a couple of screens, and then on a call like this, agree the strategy, model out a plan, lock one of those scenarios down, maybe delete the other one and move on, all within the same call, just using the options on the screen. Conscious this isn't a training course, but a number of features we haven't talked about. There is a presentation mode option here, where on the call you can talk through each of the items in turn, a bit like you would if this was a PowerPoint deck, then just pop it back as it was before when you're done. Workday incidentally does integrate with Excel, with PowerPoint, with Google Sheets. We do a lot of connected reporting in that area. Not discussing that today. Happy to pick that up and talk to you about that on another call, but that's a seamless integration that way. Anyway, what we have here is a simple 5-year plan. This is taking that detail headcount and then just with some simple rules saying, okay, I'm expecting some attrition based on my previous trend over the next few years. So my headcount's going to go down if I don't do anything, but actually my demand here is going up. So I'm modeling demand versus supply and creating a gap. And this is a growing gap for headcount over the next 5 years. Again, this is interactive. Everything is drillable. I can click on that 32 gap for the next immediate year, look on that by job family. That gives me some information. Actually, I've got slightly too many people in IT. I've got a bit of an oversupply there, but I absolutely need customer service and sales staff down here. So that this modeling is growing by job, by discipline, by skill, whatever level of detail you have underneath that. This isn't just a top side chart that isn't connected to the data. But again, it's a planning tool. So within this 5-year plan, I can model in different ways. Coming over here with my demand, again, I can really easily just take a scenario. So we'll take a quick scenario model and we'll call this 5-year test, something like that. I want to switch to that. And what this is then showing me side by side is my current plan demand versus my scenario and my current gap versus my scenario. And down here, I can then model some changes. So I could say for any of these typical business drivers, I've got transaction numbers, revenue, numbers of projects, maybe even market rate growth. And so again, I can start modeling changes in various ways. I can increase the number of transactions, and then I can say I want to copy that to the end, and that will update that automatically. And again, I just hit save. And just by doing that, that will update my entire 5-year plan. The model starts changing, the numbers go green, it tells me something's changed. I'm actually increasing the problem there because I'm raising the demand, but you can see how that's working. Here I can weight those changes. So what this table is telling you is how much of an impact does an increase in transactions have to each department in my business? So it might be that extra customers doesn't really impact the finance team, but it's going to massively impact the sales team. So you can model the impact of these changes on each of your teams. And so start building a sensible driver-based plan that has assumptions that you can rely on to build your headcount plan. So you're not spending 3 days building the plan, you're spending 3 days discussing the plan and agreeing whether those assumptions are valid, which is really where you want to be spending your time. Down here, as an example, we have some transformation projects going on. So US admin are getting a new admin system. And what this enables me to do is say, well, actually, for the next 12 months, that's probably going to have an increase in headcount because I'm going to bring a couple of people in to do testing, building, whatever it might be. But then I'm going to reduce that ongoing because I'm going to see a 30% decrease in headcount requirement once that system goes live. So building in an element of projects, change management within the business. Again, I just make that change straight away. I can see that here. So now I've got this big sort of dog leg change here where I've increased my headcount, then dropped it down, but then the natural growth in demand carries on after that. So I'm making changes to my plan as I go. On the supply side, just really quickly, in this model, supply side is just driven by attrition. So this is a fairly straightforward list of if I give the system some historical attrition rates, it will then model out the future based on those rates and any other factors I choose to apply. You could overlay external factors, changes within the business, changes within the political scenario, the geographical scenario that might drive updates to attrition. There's a number of models in Workday built in that help you do that. One of them is a machine learning predictive forecaster that runs a number of algorithms to pick up trends and model in different ways. Again, we could go more into that on another time, but just to show you, it gives you the ability here to choose different predictive methods. And again, just by hitting save, that will adjust attrition. You can choose the right one. You could load it in manually. You can model in multiple different ways to support the supply side. The final part of this for the presentation today is how Workday can support you then building an action tracker or a series of strategies to close that gap. We've still got a gap. We've made a few changes. I've got some options here, but my gap is getting bigger. And what this sheet is showing you is Workday can be a really useful, controllable, and frankly, auditable central source for business strategies. In this example, what that's doing is then saying, what am I going to do to close the gap? And this is telling me that of my 32 gap in the next year, of my future gaps over here, these are the numbers that I've managed to build with my actions below. So I've got 25 of those gaps filled just by the actions I have here. I've got 6 to go, and that's rolling out there into the future. So what I've got down here are a number of choices. We'll add a new row actually, so I can show you how it works. So I press the button here, I'll add a new row. And then maybe for the admin management team, I can select from a number of options. I can build, so I'm going to develop internal people to satisfy that need. That obviously would then create a gap somewhere else that you could manage. I can borrow from another team. I can buy, so I can hire, build, borrow, buy. We've also added bot. So a number of strategies now and a number of conversations again we're having with customers are, where can we apply AI agents to reduce the need for additional headcount? And also bench. So where are we not requiring roles and we need to, remove roles and maybe repurpose people somewhere else? So again, a number of options that you can do. Again, these are just selections and ideas. You can define the drivers, the impacts, the reasons, but I can build this in and say, yep, there you go. I'm going to build in my plan. I'm going to add that there. I'm going to say that's from January. My due date, well, let's run that right the way back and make sure that's due before that date. And again, I just hit save. That will add to my plan, immediately update my target. But what it's also done is it's increased my missing comment line here. This is tracking. You've told me you want to put in some sort of change, but you haven't given me a reason. You haven't given me, what are you going to do to make that happen? This is a really simple text field comment here. You can typically be more complex than this. You can assign managers and owners to each project. You can give chapter and verse on what you're going to do and what the impact and the benefits case might be. So this is a very simple example, but it shows you how Workday can be a centralized auditable source for this type of strategic planning for workforce in this case. But again, we do a lot of net zero initiative plans that involve people change, capital investment, reduction in emissions, the CapEx plan, to be fair, often the business case for CapEx investment across businesses tends to have people as a saving or people as an increase again, so that can be baked in here as well. And we could have other conversations where we talk about approvals, sign-offs, financial budgeting. But I'm going to stop for now and hand you back to Rob. Hopefully there you've seen a number of examples. If we go back to the beginning, just as a reminder, so we looked at the core day-to-day headcount reconciliation, which is a pain for pretty much everybody we speak to. Headcount planning on a day-to-day level, costing, starters, levers, movements, capacity, and the drivers of headcount on a tactical level. And then from a 5-year strategic planning point of view, how you can model initiatives, demand and supply to look at things in the longer term. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. That's it from me, and I will hand you back to Rob for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, no, fantastic little run through of the various things which we can do. And again, I know you just summarized it there, but these are some of the ways which we see companies doing workforce planning, as you said, that headcount planning at the basis, capacity planning, more strategic planning, perhaps talent planning. Every organization is different. But what we do know is that workforce planning is critical. It's about getting beyond the finance numbers. I think financial planning nowadays is beyond just sort of saying a cost center and an account is this. It's about getting to the heart of what drives your business. And one of the key things which drives your business is always people. Workforce planning is critical, and it will vary with different companies about how you do that and how you want to get into detail on that. But one thing which came up on the webinar itself, the couple of questions which we had around that, what we see across our customers is really connecting the business on the data is important. This is critical information. It's not just a headcount. You've got to say this person's is this content in this cost center. Are we paying this person? Does it exist in HR? But, a little bit more planning around that in terms of, where's the demand coming from? Is that match up? Have we got the right people in the right place? Things are changing quickly with AI and AI agents. How could that affect our workforce? Acquisitions and disposals might be coming in, all sorts of different pieces. So the business, not just finance, not just HR, not just the end operating bits of business, the whole organizations needs to connect and organize around this data and look at it and make decisions on this because it's one of your most critical, most variable costs. And there's lots of different ways you can do it. So as a next step, what we should suggest is reach out to us on your key issue. Say to us, hey, around workforce, this is our critical bit. It might be as a question, I need to reconcile payroll with my HR and get people aligned on headcount. It could be that you're looking, as Steve gave some examples there, demand versus capacity. Or it could be more, I'm looking at my strategic plan for the next 3 or 5 years. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear about your issues and connect on those and perhaps give you a demonstration of your specific points and build that out on there. You can reach out to myself and Steve. You'll either find us on LinkedIn, but probably the easiest way, rather than me putting up our emails and you having to copy them down, is just reach out on the on how have you registered for this webinar. Just reply to that email. We'll happily respond to you and get in touch and go to that next step. So, as we wrap up, I want to say thank you very much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. Really appreciate the time and effort you took on that. Hope you enjoyed it and hopefully speak to you soon about workforce planning. Thank you very much.